welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price. Did you enjoy the 500th video? I had a lot of fun with it. We had a lot of great things going on, special guests from all over the world, negative power counters, hard philosophical questions, a massive smash-up spoiler many of you missed, really fun stuff. But I also asked the question of what's the most overlooked or underrated faction, and I wanted to answer this question myself because of the fact that, in some respects, I'm part of the problem. As someone who talks publicly about all the cards, possibly more than anyone, I indirectly influence a faction's popularity based on who gets screen time. There's a lot of factions or cards that I like that don't get as much attention as they should, maybe because of the topics I chose, so I want to take today to try to answer that question myself. And 3 factions jumped out immediately, but I decided to talk about one in particular because of an exchange I had this week: Mad Scientists. I think that for a faction to qualify as overlooked or underrated, it needs at least 3 reasons why someone might pass it over, and 3 reasons why they shouldn't. It's hard to say that a faction is overlooked if there is nothing wrong with them, but you also need reasons to give them a second look, something to cement that underdog standing. And Mad Scientists really fall into that category for me. I think that the first reason Mad Scientists are overlooked is because of their expansion, Monster Smash. I have nothing against this expansion. Both werewolves and giant ants held historical spots in my top 10, and it introduced power counters, which are really ubiquitous. But it's also the only 4-faction expansion to get 3 titans from the event kit, which in some ways deprives the Mad Scientists of their identity. They place power counters. That's pretty much it. They do use power counters for non-power reasons, but that's not well represented in their identity. And with the many factions that place power counters, they may struggle to remain relevant because you don't get the printed power manipulation of the ants, or whatever the vampires give you. The second drawback I would name is that they have some prematurely nerfed cards. Now, this may be because of competitive parity with the other monster factions, which again, got 3 titans, 2 of which were deserved. While Igor has its uses, it's not exactly free and easy, and it can seem like a lot of work for 1 power. I personally think that Igor looks better in a monster-only context, where Heavy Drinker is killing Igor, or the Cants are getting a counter for We Will Rock You. But it's not just Igor. Lab Assistant gives the counter to someone else, as opposed to any minion. And you could argue whether or not that's an appropriate nerf, but it's not my preferred kind of nerf. For example, Supreme Intelligence of the Kree has a similar effect, and with some of the Marvel drops, it's annoying that it cannot power itself up because it ended up being a 5-power gift to someone else too often. But combine that with the Air Doctor breaking the Sonus rule, and you have a lack of minion diversity. Fortunately, power stacks easily, power creep aside, so at least they aren't competing with each other. But the lack of diversity hurts. Finally, the Doctor, while easy to use, does seem like it's outclassed. Granted, Odysseus is pretty insane, but it's really hard not to play an action per turn, making the Doctor look weak in comparison, and it can't even power itself up, which is what the Mad Scientists often want to do anyway. My third drawback would be that the top-heavy nature of the Mad Scientists may rule out some partners or not get players excited. Essentially, Igor is yet another 2 who creates a power, just in a different way, one which isn't as exciting because it's delayed. Lab Assistant is a 3 who adds 1 power, even though it's more interesting than the other ways. Since a lot of the faction strength is tied in the top tier, it basically requires card draw for consistency, and without it, they can feel slow. However, despite these drawbacks, there are 3 things that really excite me about the Mad Scientists. The first is that they have some really powerful cards, if you can set them up properly. They have the chance to play 2 extra minions per turn, anywhere, with the Monster and Uber Serum, and it is very hard to stop without a specific counter. You can set them up on flanking bases and just rush a completely different one. While I'm admittedly not a fan of the destruction loophole anymore, Body Shop makes it worth it because of the tremendous upside of this play and complete granularity of placing the power counters. This is the case where movement is not necessarily better because you are generating net new power and placing it exactly where you need it, potentially splitting it across minions or bases. Angry Mob is probably the best of your dump your hand cards because you don't have to worry about losing good ones since you can top deck yourself accordingly. Cards that grant +1 temporary power are a dime a dozen, but Jolt gives you the same power with the persistence of power counters, which supports a spread strategy, which is what they want anyway. And let's not forget that they inexplicably have one of the best summons, a free play that also gives them a power counter. For the monster, this can immediately play another minion, so they can play fast with the right cards in hand. All of these points lead into reasons 2 and 3. Reason 2 is that the Mad Scientists are surprisingly flexible in that they are a great partner for both Swarm and Power, but rarely thought about in either context, especially the former. As I said before, they can play 2 extra minions per turn for free, wherever they want. Swarm combos love that. Imagine combining that with a lunch run and just stomping a base with all of your catch-up plays. German engineering is very swarm friendly as long as it is played early. Obviously, Jolt is great for swarm, but Body Shop is also a great source of being a power drop even if you don't get to keep that minion. Imagine Disco copying a 6 power increase several times. I'd say that it is well worth the loss of the minion, but it's fairly easy to keep the minion or at least save them with grave situation. Players tend to think Mad Scientist with Pirates because of the first mate, but steady power increases with a quick injection of power play well in other capacities too. And the best part of Mad Scientists is that they do both with relative ease in switching between the two, and this leads into the third reason I get excited about them. Mad Scientists are in a fairly unique position where they can act as either the support or the headliner. They have weaknesses that can be easily filled, such as giving them card draw or extra actions, and these make them really scary quickly, but they can also be the weakness filler themselves. This makes them great in a context where they are picked either first or second, and they aren't locked into a particular playstyle. This is really important to me because there tends to be a counter-heavy focus on Smash Up, and the ability to take someone second who can act in that role, but also be capable of leading the charge is great. You can take them for their destruction prevention, which leaves aliens as the obvious counter, but aliens counter most things anyway, so it's hard to fault them for that. If you were playing a tournament, you could provide sleeper value as more obvious things come off the board, and I've had a great record with them. So who benefits from Mad Scientists? Obviously Pirates and Kittens, but those combos have been covered to death. I've mentioned Swarm Partners and Disco, but I wanted to call out a few others. Ghost Mad Scientist with the Cream Puff Man can be really scary if you commit to some epic plays. While the Dead Rise can bring out the Titan, Angry Mob does it better in my opinion, since you usually get more power unless you are in haunting range. The obvious exception to this is when you do want a card in the discard pile for Cream Puff Man, but Spectre, Angry Mob, and Cream Puff Man make a great 1-2-3 punch. If you get that indestructible minion going, it's really hard to ignore a Spectre Body Shot play on 2 successive turns. And since I'll get asked this, no, Igor does not work with Spirit sadly, but I also have no problem discarding them in this context. When you have Ghostly Arrival, they can play an extra minion and action, and that extra action can play an extra minion, and that extra minion can play an extra minion, things are lining up pretty nicely. For my other suggested pairing, it's somewhat counterintuitive and uses another faction that could easily be on the underrated list. In fact, Quality Mojo mentioned it, Star Roamers. Instead of focusing on the indestructible minion, maybe you want it to be destroyed, so that it can be moved elsewhere for space. The on-play nature of the Lab Assistant is really good for Science Officer since you can swap them out for light power increases and bursts later. Lab Assistant is also a decent combo play with Ship's Captain to port me up move a 6 power Captain, potentially buffed by Body Shop. What's interesting is that, with 2 port me ups, this can create the first mate style play without being obvious about it, and you are starting from a much lower risk, higher vantage point, less vulnerable to counters, especially since the Star Roamers give you multiple layers of protection. You've got Protector Fields, which can block everything, but let's say it gets destroyed. Ship's Engineer blocks returning to the hand. Goodbye aliens. There are multiple levels of destruction prevention. Basically, you are looking at either place or antagonistic movement, but there's still Protector Fields, so I feel pretty safe. Lab Assistant is a great teleport overflow play because the power counters stay. Mass teleport can be a war of attrition, but when you play extra minions every turn, even without the movement, you come out ahead. I really like this combo together and so should you. Despite having no draw or extra actions, they have really high upside. You can find hidden value in almost any faction, and I hate that the Mad Scientists are often overlooked. I need to include them more myself. Some people I know don't have a great win rate with them, but maybe they're the ones who are wrong. What has been your experience with the Mad Scientists? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.